if this crushes, if this does a great job, hopefully that benefits me in my career and financially and everything else. If it failed, if the show's bad, if it pooches, it just doesn't benefit me, right? It doesn't harm me at all. However, it does harm this movement of trying to build better content.
Because that means we're going back to the war room. You know, like that's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guess only thing Christians can do is war room, fireproof, you know, Kendrick Brothers type.
And so I would very much like this to succeed.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
And we're starting with an enjoyable little foray
into
Prime Video's next offering.
The next sausage from the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this one is the House of David.
Yes. Okay.
Do we set it up at all?
I'm a producer on the show and wrote on the first 2 episodes. And let's go from there. From Prime and the Lion and Wonder Project.
Can one stone change the course of history?
Cowards! Send me your champion!
Goliath!
Can one act of defiance create the legend? I will tell you the story of David, a simple shepherd boy.
Why do my brothers get to fight? And I'm stuck here.
David, you are not a man of blood.
An outcast who became one of the most famous kings who ever lived.
God does not see what man sees. He sees into the heart. And you have the heart of a lion.
The Philistines have assembled.
I saw the print of a hand, larger than a weaver's basket.
They have a giant. What?
My king. I will fight the giant.
Fight him with the same spirit you bring into this room.
You play music for my father. Now he chooses you as champion. How will you do this?
It's not about the greatness of the giant. It is about the greatness of God.
Are you afraid?
Terrified.
I believe in you.
So, as the fate of a people hangs in the balance, again I ask this question. Can one stone change the course of history?
Coming to Prime.
Are there any of your lines in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
There are.
I thought I found a few.
Yeah, maybe. The thing about this is probably the best. This is a great opportunity to talk about the industry in general. But this is a big part of what delayed Ashtown. Was the backstory is that John Irwin reached out to me and he was deciding whether to get involved in this speculative thing, then called the Capra Project, that was being incubated out of Lionsgate. And the goal was to build kind of a pirate ship, a pirate ship for the kind of content that America really actually wanted. Not faith content, but faith-friendly content, mainstream, but the kind of content that faith and families markets love, really love to watch. So that was the goal. I got involved early. This is through COVID. It was through all sorts of craziness. So all the nonsense, and got started. The first big project he really wanted to do was House of David. So I got started developing that with him. I wrote a 2-part pilot He wrote on top. You know, we kind of were doing different stuff. It was a 10 episode series, and it was basically like the front runner was Lionsgate TV, and so shareholders in this project, the Capra project, included Lionsgate, Starz, Jason Blum of Blumhouse, and others, you know, other names as well. So this was kind of this big push being incubated at Lionsgate to try to go up the middle and be aggressive with content that would fill the empty space that exists in the market that we've talked about before here.
Yeah.
You know, the family co-viewing space.
Right.
So we got started on it. It was 10 episodes. I wrote the first 2, and I wrote the season finale. I started in as kind of on a show running pass on everybody else's episodes. Brought in another guy who was on the show and became a good friend. He and I began working on this 10 episode showrunner pass. As Jesus Revolution is releasing and all these other things are going, and John's really busy and the whole build is going on. All of this kind of careens forward, you know, all these different iterations of Lionsgate TV is in. Starz is doing something else. Like Starz was going to be this was going to be a streamer. Starz was going to provide the tech. They needed tech. All these different moving pieces of this thing called the Wonder Project. At the time was the Capra Project. And so the holding company might still be the Capra Project, probably is. But so I had ownership in the company, and like we're doing this whole thing. And then the writer's strike is coming. We get through COVID, we get through everything else. The writer's strike is coming, and then Lionsgate TV is losing their pole position because of their financial deals, and they're trying to come up with a production fund to make the content. All this stuff is happening. So as the writer's strike hits, we'd been doing this kind of bootstraps and baling wire, and it was supposed to be a guild signatory. Everything kind of has to be a signatory of the guild. As the writer's strike comes at a terrible time, but also the seed round of financing for Capra was running out. They had no money. It's like it's dying. You know, it's kind of like on this tail. They're in that startup phase where you start. People start drinking their own pee as they cross the desert. You know, it's like reaches that phase. And the strike was almost like a relief to Capra because it enabled them to offload, kind of shrink back. I'm a guild writer. I have to be a guild writer. You know, it's the nature of the business when all these different studios are signatories. They're guild signatories. So they go to them. They've signed on with the guild. You can't really do stuff effectively in the industry if you're not. So I got scraped off the show right into the writer's strike. And on the other side of the strike was kind of like, we'll see what happens. But the show had to keep moving. And Lionsgate TV was gone, and all these other pieces were gone. And then Amazon came in with this production budget, and it will do an overall deal. It's now called the Wonder Project. It's not a freestanding streamer. It's not going to be a freestanding app. It's going to be a channel on Amazon, at least for the first couple of years, with a revolving production budget. It's an amazing deal. So they read my first 2 scripts. They bought the show. They're going to make 2 seasons of House of David. But then they hire up, as always happens at this point, they hire up teams of writers. The strike has ended. Yeah. You know, teams of writers are hired up, and I retain producer credit and some writing credit. But I haven't seen this. I haven't seen these episodes.
You're not involved.
I'm not involved now.
You wrote it. Yeah.
So I started this thing. I helped. I wasn't the only one, but I helped start this thing, and it's like throwing a rock off a cliff, trying to start an avalanche, and then it does start an avalanche, and it's going to go where it goes. So I think ultimately, when somebody's going to write a check for production, their mandate wins. And so when I look at this, I'm like, okay, that's not Lionsgate TV's mandate. That's not what they wanted, but then they didn't write the check. Amazon wrote a check, and Amazon has their market research, their data, and they have where they want it to slot in. It still obviously is pursuing family co-viewing. Mm-hmm. It definitely skews more faith market, more directly faith market than more Nashville than it had originally. But I think it'll probably succeed.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like it to at least, you know, and we'll see. It really depends. I won't be able to watch it. Like, I'm not going to watch it.
Why?
Because when the writer's strike hit, right when the writer's strike was hitting, my deal was terminated going into the strike. And as part of that termination, I had to sign a non-disparagement clause. So this could be the worst thing ever or the best thing ever, and I won't comment. I could, yell praises from the rooftops, and I'm not in violation. But it's a really delicate, contract.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not allowed to give a 8 out of 10. I can't give the -2. I couldn't give any kind of negativity about this show at all. Just in order to actually have my deal terminated, receive my severance payment, non-disparagement clauses are there. So I'm rooting for it. I want it to succeed.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Because I guess
maybe. And I'll say, when you see names on any project, any feature, any show, you'll see a bunch of names. And it's like this. It's not that all those guys were in the room at the same time, although sometimes that happens. It's way more like a chain of title list of the guys who owned a boat. There was this guy, then there was this guy, then there was this guy. There's all these different people who come in and steer and and take it different directions. Yeah. John has been there the whole time, kind of steering it towards where he wants it to go. But that's what it looks like. When you're looking at credits, you're looking at kind of a genealogy more than you're looking at a team that was all there at the same time.
Nice. So you're the patriarch of this genealogy.
I'm
and your grandchild is neither.
Let's just say I was the first mate on the pirate crew when it first set sail.
And you're currently on a different ship.
And I'm now on a different ship. And again, it's like professional sports. It's like a lot of other things.
Well,
Luca's a Laker now, Brian.
Yeah, no. And yes, no, we know how the villains are in that one, I think. It seems pretty obvious.
It's all, it's the way this business works.
Obviously, we've talked about it felt a little Amazon-y in the color correcting and all that. Like, we've talked a lot about the Rings of Power episode. I didn't go scene to scene, but it felt like a trailer cut from the same sort of, opening voiceover. We're gonna have shots of waterfalls, and again, I'm not disparaging here.
I think you actually didn't sign. You didn't sign it on disparagement. When I look at the colors, I look at how bright, how gamified, how adventure theme parky they're making
has
it.
That Instagram filter on it.
So including the big spinny sling thing, it's like all of that tells me like, oh wow, we're going Universal Studios. We really are kind of chasing a Marvel. John's talked a lot about a Bible cinematic universe, a BCU instead of an MCU. It's got that vibe, right? It's got that.
Him jumping out of a window backwards. With the sling is very much
that's Legolas. That's like a Legolas move. And you can see Game of Thrones shots. You can see different pieces that are there that are kind of influenced. And the influence is coming from all over the industry. But the brightness, like the vividness, the straight up the middle commercialness, which is like this is just about being commercial and having families be excited. All of that is something that I think is very conscious, very intentional, and reveals the mandate coming from Amazon and what John would really like to achieve.
Right.
Which is something that's heightened adventure, big commercial adventure, that's clean, that is obviously reinforcing a biblical narrative, that whole families will sit down and watch together and consume together. And that's obviously there. It's very much there. So, and even if creatively, if I were to watch it and I were to identify all the things that are like, oh, that's not what I would have done. This isn't what I would have done. That's not what I wrote. This is what somebody else wrote. The goal, obviously, when I look at that trailer, the goal obviously remains pretty much the same.
Family, Bible.
If we're trying to get the whole family to sit on the couch.
Whole families in. If I was going to guess, you can see very much like we want it to feel Game of Thrones, but not gross.
PG-13. It gives very PG-13 vibes.
And then it also needs to drag in people who watch The Chosen.
Yeah.
And we need that I don't know how to say it other than the friendly faces that The Chosen has, where you feel like you could stare into somebody's eyes and talk about meaning. Like, there's a few of those shots in here. I haven't seen The Chosen either. I haven't watched clips of The Chosen that I've seen. Where it's,
and I didn't sign a non-disparagement clause about The Chosen. I just didn't want to. It's easier to be supportive generally.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be supportive of that. I'm not bringing a critique.
Yeah, being a critic turns you into Stephen A.
And the fact is, with House of David, I remain incentivized for this to succeed. and not just financially. Although I am incentivized financially too, but it's not just financial. So full disclosure, paid actor over here. If this show does well, I'll make more money. But at the same time, if the show does well, it will do what I've been trying to achieve for years, which is trying to carve this space in the market.
Yeah, Bible. True Bible.
Yeah, true. Or
tell it really.
Clean, aggressive storytelling where the whole family can sit down and enjoy something and not be assaulted, but be reinforced and fed.
Yeah, because if you jump over to other David storytellings, we've talked about this, VeggieTales. Right? You can find VeggieTales or new cartoons that you see of David coming out, little cute boy focusing on the cute tiny lambs, animated. And that's the direction that's where, so this story, you can, as much as you might be like, I didn't particularly like this phrasing of the sling or whatever. That differentiation.
There will be so many things in there.
Yeah.
There will be so many things, characters, dialogue, movements in the arc, because what ended up happening is I wrote structured and wrote, like I said, the finale, episode 10 and episodes 1 and 2. I know that they then broke that in half, and over the strike, one of the other writers got hired and came on in that showrunner capacity that I had been in. And he was shaping the first 5 episodes of our 10 episodes, arc into 8. And then it was shrinking, and then it was expanding. Yeah. And so now, roughly, as far as I can tell, this is an 8-episode show, and it basically covers the material that we covered in our first 5 episodes, expanded out to 8. So the first half of the season that I worked on, I've got a volume that's just 700 pages of scripts. That was the first pass through my arc, my 10-episode arc. Basically, half of that got taken and then expanded into 8.
Yeah.
And that's season 1, and season 2 will be the back half of that first, that first arc.
We're all curious how you're going to handle it.
We're not going to get there. First, I think knowing what I know about the
structuring,
the structure and the arc, I would say we're not getting anywhere near there.
That's what I would assume. I would also assume they want that real set before they get to David's decline. You need,
and there are these arcs, and you think about the David story and King David at all, from shepherd boy warrior. How long does it take before he's king?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Long time.
And then he's even king for 7 years, but not king of the whole thing. So
there's these Robin Hood years. Yeah. There's the gathering the mighty men and kind of this outlaw band thing. And you've got this revolution, the Jonathan relationship and Saul's death, and then David King, and multiple different love stories in his life. And so you've got Michael, Abigail, Bathsheba. You've got these different.
I did think I saw in the trailer Death of Jonathan, though. I could be mixed up.
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't. Okay.
No.
It was someone else did.
I think this season, I'm guessing, like I said, I haven't read the production scripts, and I haven't watched the show.
Yeah.
I think the season is peaking at Goliath. I think you're looking at episode 8 is that big Goliath showdown that's here in the trailer. That's my guess.
They have a giant, they have a cave troll.
There's a lot. There's a lot to cover.
Pack in.
So, but as far as it goes, I really do want it to succeed, and I want it to be the ball advancing down the field for our team, right?
Right.
So if this crushes, if this does a great job, hopefully that benefits me in my career and financially and everything else. If it failed, if the show's bad, if it pooches, that doesn't just harm me financially. It doesn't. It just doesn't benefit me, right? It doesn't harm me at all. However, it does harm this movement of trying to build better content.
Because that means we're going back to the war room. That's the kind of thing. Yeah. It's like, well, I guess only thing Christians can do is war room, fireproof, Kendrick Brothers type.
And so I would very much like this to succeed.
Yeah.
If it has warts, if it doesn't have warts, if it's got things I wouldn't do, if it's got things that are contra what I did do,
right?
All the stuff that's in the writing that I did, I'm not sitting here just investing, hoping my stuff shows up on screen.
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to do that. Overwhelmingly, I want this to really expand this wedge into a very, very important market.
Right.
That is food. Yeah. Narrative food for entire families that can edify and inspire.
Well, I love. We just over the past year read through 1 Samuel at the table, so I think it'll be fascinating to watch through and talk with the kids of like,
Yeah.
Is that what happened? Do you like this description? Does that work? And
is
see if
this
that
what
works.
David's character was actually like? Is this what David's character was like? And
I
and
couldn't
so
tell
on.
who the narrator was.
I don't know.
That's one part I was
In the
trying to
trailer, I really don't know.
Yeah, so that's where I was like, is that a girl? At first, I thought it was David's voice, which sounded way young and effeminate, and then I realized, is it his mom?
It might be his mom.
Is it actually Michael? Because I could see they're really trying to
Maybe.
make Michael a major player in a way of like inspiring David to do great. And I don't know. I'm very curious to see what they add and what they decide to just whole hog. Like, no, we're gonna go straight. We're just gonna go straight through.
Yeah, it's gonna be. It will be interesting. You'll have to tell me all about it.
I don't know. I don't want to be. I guess I got to put on the disparagement pants and just disparage away where it needs it.
I mean, the thing is, like, no, there's no expectation that it's perfect. It's a show,
Yeah.
so the idea that it would be perfect is outrageous. When you have a round robin, a bunch of people working on something, the odds of it being perfect goes, even lower. Which is why it's always amazing when there's ever a good show or ever a good movie, because there's all these different creative personalities. However, it could be a net positive. It could be a big gain for the kind of storytelling we need more of.
And that the podcast is that's what we do. That's
Yeah.
what we try
So
to do.
being critical of it, like if you watch it and it was like, well, hey, I think this is weird with Michael, or I think this is weird with Samuel, or whatever, fill in the blank. Like, of course, there's going to be things to criticize and things to correct. That's just,
and we need Christians with opinions on that.
Yeah.
Like you should have an opinion on, did this actor do Samuel right?
one of the best things that could happen for the show would be to have Christians en masse watching it and engaging actively. One of our drum beats is to engage actively, not passively. To have your kids watch it and have those conversations and push against it, and to have creators and studios deal with that market research, that market feedback. And so when people are watching this stuff and saying, love this, more of this, please, but also, could we not, like, don't like this, do like this is fantastic, more of this, please. That kind of thing is really, really valuable. And it's valuable to the market, not just to your family. It's way more valuable to watch it and be active and engage and enjoy what is to be enjoyed and criticize what should be criticized, and take it as a workout.
Yeah.
It's like really use it that way, but it also benefits John and the Wonder Project and everything else if there is thoughtful engagement. And the more people that are having opinions and engaging with it thoughtfully and having discussions about this is great, no, it's not, back and forths, the better.
Right.
It's better for the show, it's better for the marketplace, it's better for the next show that comes behind this show.
Yeah.
And
this is something you probably do all the time, but we were looking at all different scenes of guys walking into dark places, opening doors, Aragorn style. There's one in here that felt kind of a little egregious in the way they had it set up, but just so much butter, I think we've talked about on it. And it's just interesting to me to watch. That's very fun to see them try to do, all right, we're going to do old Israel, walking into a dark place, and see how they handle it. And they've got some mood lighting, Yankee candles around, and a few other things, but it's fun to just compare that with, Lord of the Rings. It felt like, it was interesting to see. So I'm just very curious to watch.
See, John also, who directed a lot of this, John Irwin and John Gunn did a lot of the directing, and he always talks about stealing. He always talks about how great artists steal.
Yeah.
And he loves to steal, and he does it openly. He talks about where he got stuff. So when I see the fiery arrows like coming in, I know the scenes that he loves, that he's taking that from, and the doors pushing open. Yeah, I know exactly, what he is trying to hat tip his affection to, you know, and so he is very open about that. He talks about it all the time. And this is this shot from this place. This is this shot from this place. I love this scene so much. You know, it's like it brings him a lot of joy to borrow and, input things into the stuff that he loves. I prefer it when people are dead. I like to steal from people who are dead and can't fight back. But that's something that he does, and he does openly. You can read interviews with him right now where he talks about specific shots that he's imitating from other shows that he's loved and features. He's always been that way, and that's to his credit. He's always very open about that.
Yeah, as we should. Well, fascinating.
Yeah.
we're gonna change gears pretty aggressively into
Okay, hard gear shift.
As with that being our coda, moving into Severance.
Yeah.
As speaking of shows, and then I don't know if we have time to talk about Magnolia, but you've been telling me to watch it for a long time,
And you did.
and I did.
And it melted your face.
And I almost feel like Magnolia might be the better shift from here. Because
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so if I was going to go into Magnolia, I would say that's a movie that is trying to show God's perspective. Perhaps, well, if the David show is trying to show God's story of David, I would think that Magnolia is trying to show God's perspective in maybe the most ambitious way that I'd thought of possible. Of just like, how does God view 10 tiny ants doing our tiny things?
The intersections.
And the intersection of our 10 tiny things. But yeah, I guess, why did you want me to watch that movie?
Did you not benefit, Brian?
I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I did a lot. Obviously,
it's not for the whole family.
It's not,
it is
for, the
not
whole
for the whole family.
Don't filter it and show it to your kids.
There's a whole Tom Cruise thread that you can skip most of.
Yeah.
But it's the thing about that film is popping a little outside of that human perspective, like you're talking about, reading the story of humanity and of judgment and also of redemption. So the intersections of judgment and grace. So what happens, like the differences really in what happens with radical insertion of grace and the radical insertion of judgment.
Yeah.
And so there's the natural outworking of,
I have to pull my notes on.
Yeah, pull it
Magnolia.
up. The natural outworking of like the sins of the fathers.
Yeah.
Visited to the third and fourth generation. But sometimes grace comes in, like this violent, disruptive grace shows up. But a lot of times it's just this perpetuating crash. Like, okay, so your life sucks because of things that your dad did. But it's not because it's his fault and you're just the victim. You're making the same choices. You're sinning in the same way. You hate your father, but you're doing the exact same thing. You're just a reincarnation of all his vices. You're just
your
carrying it
dad
on.
is a womanizer, and you've not only the Tom Cruise character has doubled down. He's the
so hard.
ultimate womanizer.
Yep.
And yet he hates his dad, and
he despises his womanizer father, but he is 10x what his dad was, and that multiplication. The thing that strikes me the most with Magnolia is the fact that he actually inserts a literal plague of frogs onto Beverly Hills.
Oh, the frogs falling from the sky.
And it's perfect. It arrives and it brings this catharsis. It has this amazing catharsis of like, thank you, God. As the judgment just falls.
It cures the little homosexual guy, and, he's just like he that is what he needed, is this sudden moment of
just like big frogs. Like it's like plague of frogs / plague of cane toads. I mean, these
full
are
size African bullfrogs.
Yeah, these are large frogs. But the ability to actually, in telling a story that is realistic, to bring in something that's that divine, that is just that the judgment falling from heaven into the story and having it make sense.
Yeah,
that it actually works in the scene
and has happened.
In this world.
They zoom in on the screen, that little picture where it says it happened. It actually happened. Because they're I found that breaking of the fourth wall as he's trying to tell the story and get you to like pretty masterful.
Yeah.
Because I've also read Kafka on the Shore is a Japanese magical realism where there's a sudden, just a big fish storm where a bunch of fish just fall out of the sky apropos of nothing and have no purpose. And it was very interesting to watch somebody do that in a Western context as opposed to this Eastern sort of mystical.
Yeah.
And also find this be so, at the same time, a judgment, divine, but also something that meant something.
Yep.
And that's where Haruki Murakami did not pull off.
Meaning
out of his insanity.
So one of the things I like about Magnolia, but one of the things that it holds up for me, kind of like a standard, is that I wish that Christian storytellers would be that aggressive with our culture. Yeah. Our culture like desperately needs like unvarnished truth. Like our culture desperately needs people to be aggressive in their prophecy, in their storytelling, and so on. And the faith market has pulled punches and gone soft for so long. Has been, basically inside of a ghetto, inside of a niche for people who already agree with it. It's just been this little tiny ecosystem. And I look at a movie like that made by somebody with all sorts of personal problems. Yeah. And big chunks of the movie should not have been made. Big chunks of the movie are filthy. Yep. And yet the prophetic vision and the masculine aggression with
the willingness to talk about everything. Yeah. We're gonna do abuse on multiple levels. We'll do drug use on multiple levels, and then we'll also do the same time forgiveness, grace, and judgment on every single one of these levels as well.
All exploring the theme of the sins of the fathers who visited the third and fourth generation, which we just put on screen at the beginning and then go. And so it's done with such boldness and with such like unflinching pursuit that I wish Christian storytellers would do that. And I think we're getting there. And we actually see this politically too right now, where there's a relief. Trump is like a plague of frogs. There's this relief that somebody's just ripping things apart and telling the truth and just being like, look at this corruption. Look at how many millions of dollars were given to Angelina Jolie to stand next to Zelensky. 20 million tax dollars given to Angelina Jolie to stand next to Zelensky for a photo op. Look at this. Look at the fact that the federal government was funding Politico. The Politico was just a propaganda arm of the Fed, and it was being underwritten by
37 subscriptions. Yeah, $500,000,
millions of dollars being infused. The fact that U.S. tax dollars were going to the BBC, to the Associated Press, to the New York Times.
We're the second largest funder of British national news. Yeah, no wonder they were all in lockstep on COVID.
Exactly.
All the funding was right there.
So there's all this ripping. Yeah. All this like just aggressive truth seeking and just revealing, tearing things apart and revealing. And the fact is, we all know Trump's not a good little Christian. Yeah. I'm not saying he's not regenerate. I don't know. I can't see his heart. God's obviously using him. But I know that if you took a Baptist leader or an evangelical who was a good little Christian and you put him in that chair, he would never have that aggression. He would never hurt that many feelings.
Marco Rubio and the speaker, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, a bunch of guys who were kind of spineless. Yeah. All of a sudden, with a leader, are like, okay, here we go.
Wow, turns out with an alpha in front of the pack, these guys are good pack dogs. They're fine. Yep. But when I see like B.T. Anderson and Magnolia, I feel the same way. I'm like, man, we need Christian leadership like this. So if you take storytelling like Magnolia and then you have it be a wise Christian director who's not going to be filthy, he's not going to include the same kind of wallowing that P.T. Anderson does. Rip this whole thread out, infuse something else. It's like Flannery O'Connor. It's like C.S. Lewis. Where are the people who are doing it with aggression, like with aggressive honesty, and who don't give a rip what people might think about it? So that can be a real downside when a director is making a movie and he doesn't care what the audience says back. He wants it to affect the audience, but he doesn't care what the comment cards say. Right. He's just going for it. And if it's true, good, and beautiful, he's going to do it. And he's committed to it. Yeah. It's like Trump right now, where he doesn't give a rip how many people are mad, how many people are upset. He's just ripping apart the exoskeleton and trying to get to the truth. And that's something I really wish that we'd been doing for generations. So,
I mean, you can look at the movie and see how different characters were handled and how easy it would have been to break the story. The redhead young wife.
The redhead.
Yes. She would have been excused for everything in most other movies.
Yeah.
So the idea of...
There would have been no judgment. No judgment at all because of what she'd been through.
Right.
So it's like...
There'd be like an old man married you and took advantage of you, and you sleeping around and doing drugs is kind of, if that's okay. I mean... You do what you need to do, right?
But it's your trauma. It's your trauma.
Yeah. Instead, she gets an entire, she judges herself.
Yeah.
And
it is her trauma.
Right.
It is her trauma. And yet the thing is that she then perpetuates it. Yep. Instead of being that point of radical grace that turns against it and goes the other direction.
Right. And her repentance, she gets away with at the very end and has a chance to redeem, just like Tom Cruise's character does. Obviously, his would have been an easy villain.
Yeah.
That's a villain in every movie. The guy who takes advantage of women.
Yep.
Yeah, we know. We're used to that one.
And Tom Cruise plays this guy. He's a really filthy guy who sells a package into his conferences, trying
Called
to train
Seduce
men.
and Destroy.
Yeah, trying to train men to seduce and destroy.
Yeah.
And that it's like so on the nose. And this is what he's doing. He's doing the seduce and destroy conferences, and he's selling this package.
Yeah.
And that dude is ticked at his womanizing father, like that guy
For leaving his mom.
Yeah,
when she had cancer.
cannot forgive.
Okay, but
his
we got to
dad.
jump into the actual outspoken Christian in this movie. The cop.
Yeah.
Such an amazing, such a different acting job from that guy.
John C. Reilly. Yeah.
So fun to see him in this one. And he ends with what you talked about, where he's doing that's the tough part of the job. What can we forgive?
Yep.
Where he's a cop agonizing over, I really like this cokehead girl.
Yep.
And I also lost my gun, and I'm trying to help out in this hood situation. And I don't know. He said he's just talking about how hard it is to do the right thing. And he says sometimes people need to be forgiven, and sometimes they need to go to jail. And that's a very tricky thing on my part.
Yep. Yeah. The intersection right there, the intersection of law, grace.
Yeah.
The fact, is being explored in that character.
Right.
And he actually is one of the guys who actually gets to just roll with the plague of frogs. Like he just accepts it.
Yep.
And is navigating through it, which is just amazing.
Yeah. Helping people out.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. I think his gun falls out of the sky. I couldn't tell at the very end. He's been looking for it the whole time. It's just he gets some grace there.
Yeah, he's operating in that space, in that intersection of law and grace. And it's a wild show. And the thing that's funny is that I have been in many, many, many meetings with many, many, many people who want faith content. They want Christian content. And if I were to pitch them anything approaching that, it would be like, oh man, we can't. Yeah. No, totally. Movies like that don't succeed. No, we can't.
Right. Well, this is a hard watch.
Oh yeah.
10 different threads doing almost no work besides the fact that you grant Paul Thomas Anderson, he's going to get me where I need to go. So I'm going to go ahead and watch this. And that first hour is pretty brutal.
Yep.
As you're just watching disaster.
Yeah.
Disaster after disaster strike and trying to figure out who's doing what and what is happening. And then it was about in the second hour and a half in that you start to feel like, oh man, this might be resolved. And I thought that was pretty masterful. As opposed to movies that you've watched that are just wrecks the entire time.
Yeah.
You think it's going to be bad. You start to think, wait, there could be.
Wait, is that light I see breaking through the storm? Is that a God ray I see?
Could there be something behind this?
Yeah, it is really striking that way. And while it's a film that is not a film I can't even filter this enough to show my kids.
Yeah.
It's like, so even if I were to try to filter it, it's not something I could sit down and discuss with my kids. It's just too far. He takes it way too far. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it makes me yearn for this kind of story, but done faithfully. So as much technical value as he has, and as much as he hits the truth and finds the truth in these places, he himself, and I think this is a big part of it and part of what he's exploring, he himself is one of the children of filth. Mm-hmm. Like he has come from this line, and he is perpetuating it. Yeah. While also trying to resist it and trying to find how to get out of it. He is, in making this movie and in making the movie the way he made it, he's still perpetuating some of the filth inheritance that's come from upstream. Yep. And so the thing really, is, Slumdog Millionaire is another one where it's like it's really complex, it's intricate, it's got layers and layers going on. And if you were to pitch it, if you were to try to pitch this to anybody in a faith market, you would really, really struggle. You would have a hard time trying to actually get the yes. It has to have so many components, just like a horror film has to have very particular components. Faith content has to have very particular componts. And it
has to be pre-digested too, which is
that's a huge part. It has to be processed.
It's like if Paul Thomas Anderson had been overt on the nose about exactly what he was going to do with each of these characters. Now this bad character, is going to do this. The trivia kid, for example, his arc of eventually, wetting his pants on stage because they won't let him off. Brutal stuff for a
Yep.
kid, right? And then finally standing up to his dad and saying, "You have to be nicer to me." That's his arc, right?
Yep.
But that's not necessarily a pre-digested arc.
No.
It's not easy to be like, yeah, what do you do now?
You have to see it, and you have to come to your own conclusions and draw your own judgments and extrapolate.
Yep.
It's whole grain. It's not ultra processed.
Yeah.
And
And then I was going to ask you too about Philip Seymour Hoffman's nurse character. He's one that I didn't feel like I had it. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay.
He's there, and it's like it makes you think and makes you wonder. And I think part of it is it's the realization that the camera might be up here looking at 10. It could go higher, and it could follow more and more and more and more. So that nurse character to me is sort of just a signal that we could follow this guy's whole thread.
And he's a catalyst, so he drives the resolution of actually Julia and Tom Cruise.
Yep.
Where we look forward and hope.
But he's got a backstory.
Yeah.
He's got a whole backstory, and there's all this causation in his story, and just the discovery
He
that
kills one of the dogs, which is pretty funny. Like, it's just kind of done off screen. He drops a Vicodin, and the dog just slurps it up, and that's the end of that dog.
It's like,
Later, but you're waiting a good 45 minutes, I think, before you see the dead dog, and it's in that closing scene when you're already feeling it pretty raw. This part. And then it pans, and there's like one of the dogs just.
It's amazing.
Pretty deft stuff.
But yeah, it's amazing. But I do think one of my favorite parts in all of Tolkien is when Aragorn's going through the paths of the dead and he finds the sealed door.
Yeah.
And there's the skeleton at the door, and there's all the scratching on the stone. Mm-hmm. And just the acknowledgement, the discovery that there are near infinite numbers of stories going every different direction, but we're just going to walk past this one.
Yeah.
And there's characters like that in this film where you realize we're sitting here looking at this story from much higher up than we normally would. We're seeing more intricacy in the tapestry than we normally would see in a film.
Yep.
And more threads intersecting, but we could go even higher.
Yeah.
And it would just scale out.
Well, the scene, it ends in a Mobile gas station, right? And I'm probably reading about it, just pointed out that used to be Magnolia. Petroleum was the name before Mobile was, because I was going to ask why is it called Magnolia?
I don't know.
And
I've read the things but I don't know the truth about it.
And obviously I think that's just clearly there's got to be a number of coincidences. I didn't watch.
Someone was probably smoking pot and named it that.
I also didn't watch closely enough on botany to find out how many magnolia trees show up throughout the thing. So who knows?
I don't know.
Did he lose his gun in a giant?
I've seen theories. I've seen people. I've seen people speculate and read stuff online as they argue about it, and I think it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. I mean, it's a flower too. We've got Fibonacci sequence and constant expanding. It's like
you got you have the image of just the bloom in the black.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the best tell is like there's this white bright bloom surrounded by darkness.
Yeah.
And that's the actual theatrical art that was used. It's powerfully made. And it's the kind of construction, the kind of architecture, and the kind of power that I would love to see Christian storytellers utilizing. Instead of trying to be accepted, and there's so much like trying to be accepted that happens for Christian storytellers, it's so much better to just be thinking like I've got a hand grenade, and this might be the only hand grenade that I ever get to use.
Yeah.
So how do I tell the story with maximum impact and really, really push for it? To be as impactful as possible. Then maybe I'll get another one, maybe I won't.
Yeah.
But we do spend so much time. I think that Christian writers, directors, novelists spend a ton of time looking for that acceptance, looking to belong, looking to get access.
Yeah.
Can we please have access? And as a result, there's fear and there's pulling of punches. And
I think Christians in general, I mean, we've talked about this, but that's how I feel. I've felt, especially in just conversations. As a Christian who's being asked advice from somebody,
right?
Are you worried about, am I going to ruin this relationship?
Is this going to be too off-putting?
Do I have to be really rhetorical in how I say this so that I can talk to them again? It's like, well, stop worrying about all that. You don't control it. Like say the right thing.
Just go for it.
And
say the thing. Let God use it.
Sometimes you're going to mess up.
Yeah, exactly. say the thing and let God use it or not. And so that's honestly, it's why I'm thrilled that House of David is coming out, that it was made.
Yeah.
That this wasn't just one of those things that I got to work on that then sat on a shelf. You know, there's a lot of those things too. This one's happening, and I hope it goes out, and I hope it's impactful, and I hope it moves the ball down the field. And whether it moves the ball 7 yards or 15 or 50, I want it to move positively and hopefully expand this wedge of a kind of storytelling that we need more of, that we need a lot more of. And at the same time, when I talk to aspiring writers, novelists, filmmakers, and they have their thing, there's this demon on the right shoulder, demon on the left shoulder. There's often these creative, or I guess one is an angel.
Yeah.
There are often these creative visions and things they want to accomplish. Like, I want to tell this story, and I think it could be really powerful. And then there is the demon but I really want to be in the cool kid club. I really want an agent. I really want to be, in the guild. I really want to be this. I want to be accepted. I want to be able to get meetings and so on. And that's just death. So if you're going to be a prophet, and we need more artists who are truly prophetic, then you've got to be willing to walk in there wearing animal, or wearing a hair shirt and eating your locust. You got to be ready to just walk in there, the wild man from the wilderness, and say it, let it fly, and be okay if your head ends up on a platter.
Yeah.
And that's the calling. And unfortunately, this goes back to the capitalism conversation. The nature of the desire for success and money and trying to, treat it like a trade. All that's true. There's a space for it, but we need those prophets who are willing to just go die. They're willing to just go down in flames, telling the stories the way they need to be told, in a way that will outlast their own careers and their own lifespans and remain impactful afterward. But that's hard to do, but it's something that we got to be pursuing.
Well, I was comparing this with Coen Brothers and how you, as an audience, we're actually pretty quick to judge.
Yeah.
And we judge fast a lot of people deserving of death.
Yeah.
Just overt death. And I feel like the Coen Brothers tend to give you the death that you've judged these characters with. You're like, they deserve this.
Which film are you thinking?
I'm thinking of No Country for Old Men, and then also Burn After Reading.
Yeah.
And some of those are the ones. And then There Will Be Blood. No, sorry, not There Will Be Blood. It's well, now I'm messing up my Coen Brothers movies, but
The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, well, that's true. That one's more fun. Maybe some of their recent ones. But I felt like
Fargo.
Fargo. Yeah, PTA does seem like he turns out of a number of situations where we're deserving death and allows a little bit of life. So we have a couple judgments.
Judgments deserved.
Yeah,
across the board.
Right.
Like, it's just deserved. Yeah. And that intersection of when to forgive, where the grace arrives, that's the question.
And that's where I'm curious too, because I know that he and I don't agree on that question. But but also it's fascinating to watch him and feel yourself judging the character really hard, and then also letting others off the hook.
I'll say this is a hard word, I think, is that we don't agree with PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, and we do not have the exact same alignment on who ought to be forgiven and who ought to be judged. But neither do we agree with God at all about who ought to be forgiven and who ought to be judged. And so that's a constant confusion for us, because it doesn't have to do with looking at the vessel of judgment, the vessel of destruction. It doesn't have to do with looking at them and saying, well, the bones are good, so I'll forgive. There's nothing in the redeemed when they were fallen that earned that redemption.
Yep.
And so when we see Paul being saved out of his murderous ways, that was hard. It's a hard pill for people to swallow. God saves, like, he inserts grace and saves whom he wants to save.
Those who don't deserve it.
Everyone, those who don't deserve it. And so when we watch the movies around us, when we watch all the stories around us, we are not ready to see some people saved. We are so quick to judge. And we want to see destruction. We want to see God lay them low. And when God's nice to them instead, when God gives them grace instead, it rankles. We're all Jonah. So we actually, we can really struggle with that. And it's hard. But that, it's a beautiful thing. It's an awesome thing. And how it's used in stories hopefully imitates the real. And I think it does in Magnolia. I think it really is kind of potent.
Well, yeah, that's where we started with. I do think it's trying to take a divine perspective.
Yeah.
Like what happens when you look at the weather as if it's a stage direction, and you get the regular clips of like, this is what the day's weather is, you know, and it's like all the coincidences come together into one massive tapestry, and they don't all mean something, but the big things still do.
Yep. They don't all mean something that you understand.
Sure, that's the way to put it.
Like you might not comprehend it all. And I honestly, I do think that Lewis does similar things. He shows in Screwtape, in Great Divorce, and some of his other writings, you see his deep insight into broken humanity and judgment, and that law grace intersection, and the inscrutability of salvation, like just of where people break and are redeemed versus where people are like stubborn and go to judgment. I think he explores it with a great deal more wisdom than Paul Thomas Anderson does.
Yeah.
But that movie reminds me probably the most of The Great Divorce.
Interesting.
In terms of
I can see that.
It's just X-ray vision into characters.
Bunch of characters.
Yeah.
Even their good aspects.
Yep.
You know, we're going to look at in a different light.
And
things
Lewis was so good at it.
Right.
And didn't have the same corruption that PTA deals with. So far more edifying.
Yeah.
Overall. So here we are talking about a movie that's almost unwatchable. Yeah. You know, you have to skip.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of value in it. If you have any desire to engage with movies at this level, there's a lot.
Oh, totally. Some of the
House of David will be very different.
Yeah.
You should be able to just watch that one.
Tom Cruise saying to his dad, "I'm not going to cry for you," like that. Did pretty good acting in that whole section.
I was really surprised that Tom Cruise took that role. Honestly, very, very surprised.
Yep.
But he did, and he went on full send.
Yeah, he did. He didn't.
But like I said, most of those are just skip.
Right.
Skip.
Yep.
So I say most, probably all of them. But there we go. Some House of David, some Magnolia. Do we have anything else we need to cover?
No, I think that's it. That's two very different, but also
same discussion.
Same discussion.
Yeah, same discussion. And I do think there's a question to be had. Like, could we have made a show of King David that would be unwatchable for kids? Could we have made a show that would have been true, but not actually accessible? The answer is yeah, absolutely, of course. Would have been very, very easy to do that. And the goal is to have everybody be able to watch it. Magnolia is in that space of, yes, truth-telling, a kind of storytelling I want more of. I want more of this kind of storytelling in the world, and yet is borderline unwatchable.
Right.
And that's back to the knowledge of good and evil being dangerous to us and so on. There's just a kind of realism that is not helpful. So you have to exercise the power of the remote pretty heavily.
I do feel like literary fiction tries to do that a lot more often than movies do. And almost the other ditch for literary fiction. But that sort of like, hey, can we track somebody's life and just weigh it for 200 pages? Like that's the sort of feeling you get in Magnolia that normally I'm familiar with in a book.
Yep.
But I don't know.
So Plague of Frogs remains one of my favorite scenes in movie history.
Dude.
So there you go. On that, some people will watch this and be like, "What's wrong with you?" And some people will take all the cautions, take all the warnings. Like it is in need of heavy filtering.
I mean, you just can read about it and there you go.
Yep. This has been SASF. Until next time.
These herbivores eat around 350 pounds of vegetation per day. It would take 15 average cows to beat that amount. Look at them. They're spectacular trunks, each possessing nerves, connective tissue, fat, and 150,000 muscle fascicles in a very complicated arrangement surrounding the nasal passage, and all neatly wrapped in gray, wrinkly skin, giving this upper lip and nose combination truly phenomenal multitasking abilities, ranging from wet vac, shower nozzle, snorkel, trumpet, tree snapper, tourist tosser, affection giver, and all-purpose picker-upper with exceedingly fine motor skills and incredible lifting power. These are truly mythical creatures,